from a long line of storytellers. My dad, at almost 80 years old, is still writing songs. He worked in the entertainment industry when I was a child, and some of my fondest memories are of the nighttime stories I would be told, oftentimes to music, or he would sing us to sleep with his guitar. My mom and my grandmom both wrote poetry, and I can also remember when I was a child of about 6 or 7, I asked my great-grandmother on my mom's side, I said, "Mama Han, where do we come from?" And she said, "Well, what do you mean? We came from Georgia." And I said, "No, where do we come from?" And she thought about it, and she finally said, "Well, we're Scots-Irish." And I said, "Oh, what is that? What's Scots-Irish?" And she handed me a spoon, and she said, "Go on out there in the dirt and dig some of those potatoes." So I did. I kind of, didn't think about it for years and years. And later on, when I was in my 30s and I was getting into genealogy, it was that heritage that I actually started kind of pulling the thread and learning a bit more about that aspect of my heritage. And then I had the opportunity to go to Ireland and the northern part of England, right on the Scotland border. Had the opportunity to go there on a study abroad. And then a few years later, I went back on another trip, this time just to Ireland. And then I've since returned to Ireland a couple of times. And in 2018, I did the Global Studies Ireland trip with Dr. Eddie there at the School of Education. And it was during that time that we had a reflective journal that we had to do for the trip, and I requested to do something a bit different, and that was, she was completely open to that, and so I did transmedia storytelling, and that was a huge success for me. And there were a couple things that were written up about it on the website, and there was even a couple of local news that highlighted her and me with that. So I just found it an incredible process to be able to reflect and for meaning making, and to deal with some of the dissonance that I was feeling on that particular trip. We were up in the north of Ireland, where I had never traveled before, and we were traveling to a lot of the sites that had been central to the Troubles there in Ireland, when Ireland was experiencing its civil rights movement, and a lot of the violence that came out of that. So after that, I began studying it a bit more and using that as a medium. And it's not ironic that I did this, because in my early days of my military career, I was actually a public affairs specialist. And so I did a lot of writing and a lot of photojournalism and videography. So I was very happy to kind of be returning to those roots and to be able to use those skills, but in a way that was useful for education, and not just students, but it's something that can also be very useful to faculty members and to teachers in training. So as I got more and more interested in storytelling, I was talking to some folks at the college about it, and we had tried to get a veterans storytelling project off the ground a couple times before, but we finally, in partnering with the new Student Veteran Office of Student Engagement, and with the Watermen's Museum in Yorktown, and the Armed Services Arts Partnership, we have a theme coming together. So I'm very excited for those of you who, and I'm very thankful for those of you who have offered to share your stories and to be part of this. And a big shout out to the Watermans for the venue. They've given me the option to keep the storytelling going, and we'll do that. I don't know that every month will be themed for veterans, but we'll find some interesting themes, and we'll we'll let you all know how that goes. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Hi, my name is Devonte Allen, and I have never served in the military, but am the product of two incredible military veterans. My early childhood was sort of the traditional Army brat lifestyle. I was born and raised overseas and moved every few years. Although my memory is a little hazy from that time, I credit my affiliation with the military and my veteran parents for cultivating my desire to lead a life of service. My parents financially supported their families and gave back in various ways to their community. My father volunteered as a coach and referee in his limited free time, and my mother crafted outreach programs for veterans and their families to ensure that they were aware of their benefits and the significance of their service. This daily commitment to service that my parents showed was incredible, but I thought it was normal, that everyone's parents felt that sense of duty. So in short, my military affiliation has normalized a way of life that leads with service. And I hope that through my position as a GA with the Office of Student Veteran Engagement, that I can make my parents proud and assist William & Mary to better serve the needs of our student veterans.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Brinkus. I am a junior at the College of William & Mary, and I served 9 years in the United States Navy, where I was a hull maintenance technician, a welder, or a plumber. And a story I want to talk about today is when I made the transition from my A school where I was taught how to weld and do plumbing work to being stationed on my ship. Now, when I was at A school, they gave you a sheet saying, hey, where do you want to go? Is there any particular ship you want to go on? Is there a type of platform or a base that you want to go on? And of course, everybody wants to go to Hawaii or Guam or Diego Garcia. For me, I wanted to stay as close to Michigan as possible. I was originally from Michigan, but I also wanted to go somewhere that was nice. So I picked Jacksonville, and then they gave me the option, oh, what type of ship do you want to go on? And I picked every class of ship except for a carrier. And when they gave me my orders, they gave me Norfolk, Virginia on the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier. And I was like, okay, I'll go into it with a blank slate. I don't know anything about it. So I will make my determination once I get there. So moving forward about 2 weeks, I went home to visit family before I got shipped out. It turns out that the USS Enterprise was already in the Arabian Gulf. So I would be flying to Bahrain and then jumping onto the boat via a Greyhound. So it was about a 20-hour flight with the time difference from Norfolk, Virginia to Bahrain. And we stopped in Portugal and then Italy and then Greece and then finally made it to Bahrain. Had about a 2-day layover. And this is where the story gets interesting. We went to the tarmac, me and another group of sailors that were just joining the boat. And we jumped on this transport plane for cargo and for personnel. And the seats that are in the plane are facing towards the rear door where you entered. So we get down, we strapped in, and the door in the back, the bay door, is still open. And the pilot's like, I hear it because you have a little headset with a cranial on, and the pilot says, okay, we're good to go. And still has the door open, and the plane is taxiing down the runway, door still open. I'm looking at the other service members that are part of the air crew here, and they're not worrying about this, and we have comms on our earmuffs. Nothing. Base door still open. I'm in a foreign country I've never been to before. I'm 19 years old. And I'm like, planes I've been on before don't look like this. All of a sudden, we're going down the runway, taking off with the door open, and the pilot takes off. Doors open, straight up in the air. And I'm like, I don't know if that's supposed to be right. And then finally closed it. But I think he knew that we were brand new to the Navy, so he tried to give us our first Navy experience of flying on that type of plane. And then about 2 hours into the flight, we got over the comms that we're coming in for a landing on board the aircraft carrier. It's an experience that I could never have imagined that I'd be in. This coming down, there was only one window, and fortunately I had that one window. So I was looking out and I just see blue, blue, blue. And then I just, all of a sudden, right onto the deck, I see just gray, like the gray of the ship and the island, and then just a very abrupt stop. They open the bay doors and it's just F-18s and tons of helicopters, different types of aircraft. I mean, it looks like you're in a movie on board an aircraft carrier. And looking back, I was 19 years old. The transition of coming from a high school kid to becoming instantly, as soon as those wheels touched on board the aircraft carrier, a sailor, and knowing that my life would be changed forever, and the experiences that were to come would shape my decision to continue my career for almost 10 years and raise a family. And it was that from that, as soon as those wheels touched down, I automatically knew that this was going to take me to even higher levels of commitment, not only to my shipmates, my family, but also my country. So I hope you all enjoyed my story, and I will see you later. Thank you very much. Bye.
The year of 1976 was the first year that women came to the military academies, which is to say in the fall semester of 1976 they started, so that the first women graduates graduated with the class of 1980. But the law that it was changed and allowed women to come to the academies for the first time didn't occur much before they showed up at the gates as an entering class. So that meant that there was about 1 year to get ready for a fundamental change at academies that had been historically all male, in the case of West Point, since the early 1800s. So this was a significant change as institutions and as cultures. I just happened to be in the class of 1976 getting ready to graduate as the Air Force Academy prepared to receive its first class that would include women just a month or two after I graduated. So all the academies took different approaches to how to prepare. At the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, the approach included bringing in about 20 officers, women officers, lieutenants and captains. They had already been through their commissioning service. They had been through ROTC, or they'd been through some kind of officer training. So they were already in the active duty Air Force. But this group of ladies came to the Air Force Academy as a group who would go through, in a very short period of time, about the roughest parts of the academy experience, which is to say in the spring of 1976, a few months before the first young ladies came in as cadets. This group of officers went through training using the cadets who were about ready to graduate as their trainers, so that they would have some knowledge and some empathy for what the first class that would include the women cadets would face. And so whether it was the obstacle course or the endurance course or the prisoner of war, simulated prisoner of war camp, this group of lieutenants and captains came in, they put on their combat type uniforms, they took their rank off, and for a period of 2 or 3 months, they acted as if they were 18-year-olds just facing the Air Force Academy for the very first time. That was a rough experience. These were already seasoned professionals who had had a lot of responsibility, who were asked to basically go backwards in time as if they were high school graduates just getting ready to face a very, very fascinating and pioneering experience to be the first women to go into one of the military academies. These ladies were called Air Training Officers. That was the name that was given to them. It was not a new idea when the Air Force Academy was established in 1954, again, because there were no cadets who had already been there. People had to come in to play those roles for the men. So the Air Training Officer concept actually went back to the 1950s. At that time, there were Annapolis graduates, there were West Point graduates who had the experience of an academy, and they would come in and play a similar role. By the 1970s, there were no women who had ever done that, so it, in a sense, had to be created to give them enough of the experience that they could really help be of assistance to the young ladies who did come in as the first cadets. So this idea that they would have the roughest parts of the academy, there was no fun time for them for the most part. My personal experience with this group came about because the Air Force Academy's Honor Code included a pretty substantial education portion to it. So there were a number of the senior cadets who were honor representatives who occasionally would have to sit on an honor board and decide whether a fellow cadet had violated the code and what to do about it. Understanding that honor code, understanding the implications of it, helping young people make some substantial shifts in their life depending on what their previous experience had been, was pretty important. And the honor code at the academies, as many people know, compared to some other institutions, is rather non-forgiving. It's a tough code, and these women officers coming in, for the most part, had not been to institutions in their own academic training that necessarily included the honor code experience. So for such a fundamental part of the Air Force Academy's heritage and structure and sense of accountability, it was really key that these officers that were going to help the new cadets understood about the honor code. So that was one of the tasks that I took on as a senior, was to conduct the honor code lessons, or at least some of them. So I probably met with these officers 4 or 5 times, with often an hour or so. Sometimes it was in a classroom. Sometimes when they were out doing their field training, I would go out to the field and we'd spend an hour or so talking about the kinds of situations that could come up that might be honor related. They had to understand how the code functioned as far as how honor violations were discovered or reported and what the steps were. So they had to understand the mechanics as well. But most importantly, they had to have a sense for the environment that the young ladies were going to be in when they showed up at the academy. And the men already had the advantage. The upperclassmen had already been through 1, 2, or 3 years of the academy when freshmen showed up. But for the women, it was going to be different. So that was a challenge that, among many, that the academy faced in trying to prepare for the first women cadets, was how to make the academy ready to receive them, and how to give enough training, enough sense of the academy to a group of officers who could then be role models for the young ladies who showed up. So that was, for me, a great experience to be part of that transition. And it was just the luck of the timing for me that I was graduating just in time to help welcome first the officers and then the First Lady cadets. There you go.
On one occasion, my unit sent me to England for 2 weeks to work with a Royal Air Force unit there that had acquired some of the same equipment and technology that we had been using. And so they sent me there to help with their training program for this equipment. And I was very happy to go because I love traveling, and I had never been to England before. So it was going to be a new experience for me, but it turned out to be a much more memorable experience than I had anticipated. There was an American Air Force captain who worked there at the unit as a sort of liaison, and he was the one who oversaw my visit there, and was going to get me set up with lodging and a rental car, because I was there, since I came alone, I was going to be taking myself around to work and for any other tasks. But it turned out that I was too young to rent a car, even though I had rented vehicles in the States before, but I was 24 years old, and the minimum age to rent a car was 25 in England, so I was out of luck there. There also wasn't any space for me on the base that I was working. There was no lodging, and so they put me up at a dormitory on another Royal Air Force base that was about 10 minutes down the road. But that made for a very interesting experience, because I would work during the day at the one base, and then go back to dine and to sleep at this other base. And I was actually put up in a dorm that was for the senior enlisted, and I was a junior. I was junior enlisted, so already I feel out of place because I'm the only American in the building. But on top of that, I'm also the lowest ranking, and I'm not feeling like really don't belong here. But everyone was very kind and very welcoming, and I think they were amused that they were suddenly randomly hosting this junior enlisted American Air Force member. And I remember one of the first times at the mess hall, nobody gave me any cultural training before I left, for even just casual eating etiquette, much less, at a Royal Air Force mess hall, like with a senior enlisted. So I'm sitting around the table. They had these big round tables, and they, where I would have maybe sat by myself, like kept to myself when I get my tray of food. The ladies at the mess hall said, please all fill a table before you fill another one. And the tables were these big round tables, and sat 8 or 10 people around them. And so I was forced to sit around these people. I don't know any of them, and I had to kind of explain why I just randomly ended up there. And on top of that, there were some accents that I was really struggling with. There were a couple of Irish and Scottish guys there at the table, and I'm sitting around. I'm looking at how people are eating their food. Okay, keep the tines down, take small bites. Hopefully nobody asks me too many questions, because I'm not sure how to respond. I'm just listening and pretending to understand what's going on with this guy. Two guys are talking across the table, and all of a sudden one guy looks at me and he says, "You don't understand a word he's saying, do you?" And the guy had a very thick North Irish. He was from Northern Ireland, so he had a really thick accent, and I couldn't understand anything. And he looked at me and said a whole string of words, and all I understood was Yankee Doodle. So I knew that he was teasing me for being an American, and that was about it. But it was all lighthearted, and it was fun. It also happened to be around Christmas time that I was there. It was the first couple of weeks of December. The unit that I was working with had a holiday party that they invited me to. They're like, "Oh, while you're here, you might as well join us." And then meanwhile, back at the base I'm lodging at, they're like, "We're having this Christmas ball. How long are you going to be staying with us? You should come." And so they set me up with a date for this ball. And so I actually attended both the events because they were in different days. And the American Air Force captain and his wife took me shopping, and I got a gown and shoes to wear. And because these parties were with two totally separate groups of people, I got to wear didn't have to worry. I wore the same gown to both events, and it was a very festive atmosphere and an adventure that I had not anticipated at all. And the ball was really fun. I met a group of warrant officers who worked on that base, and had some really fascinating conversations listening to their experiences. I mean, they had long military careers, and they were telling me about their experiences in Iraq and deploying there in the early 2000s. And so by the end of the ball, one of these warrant officers, he said, "Why don't you come with us? Let's all get our photo taken out in the lobby." There was a professional photographer there. And so we all go out there, and we're all in our formal civilian dress, and they sit me down in a chair, and they stand in a half circle behind me, these 3 warrant officers, and we get our photo taken, and he says, "I'll mail it to you." And he did. So a couple couple months after I got back to the States, I got this nice print in the mail, from this Christmas ball, and it's like sitting on my mantle, and it's just a crazy experience because I didn't even work with these people, it was and the only reason that it even happened is because I wasn't able to stay at the other base where I was working. So I ended up having kind of making two sets of British acquaintances that, I hadn't anticipated. And so it was just a great time, a really memorable experience. And, my first taste of a little bit of culture shock, because it was like I was just plucked from the environment I was used to and put into this totally different world. I mean, because that base was separated from even the work that I was familiar with, it was just, I was suddenly having to navigate this social, cultural experience that I wasn't prepared for. So I learned a lot, and I laughed a lot, and it was just a great time. It was a warm atmosphere because everyone was celebrating Christmas, and they were happy to have me just join in the festivities. So that was a great experience. Thank you for listening, and happy Veterans Day.
Okay, so I should start off by saying that I do not like Christmas, and I guess that's probably a separate story. But my mom and my sister always mess with me by not allowing me to not like it. And one of the big times I remember them doing that is when I was stationed in Japan, and first time being away from home, for that long. And what my mom decided to do was adopt my shop, this AFN detachment, this All Marine AFN detachment. Her dentist office would adopt my office. And so what she asked me to do is she asked me to give her reconnaissance on everybody in the office. So like how old were they, male or female, what kind of things they like. And in the cases of, some of my bosses, do they have any kids? Because they were actually going to even include the kids. And so this is a pretty Alabama kind of thing, is, oh, let's buy all this stuff for these people we don't even know, Tuscaloosa in the house. And so this dentist office adopts my office, and they ultimately ship what I affectionately refer to as Pandora's box all the way to Japan. My mom said it cost more to ship it than the entire contents added up cost. And I told her, because it was going to a APO, a military post office, APO, FPO, that sort of thing, that she'd have to ship it like well in advance. I don't know how long it's going to take to get here. So she goes, okay. And so it got there kind of a week after she shipped it. So basically it was more than a month early. And so then we've got this little barracks room, and I've got this humongous box. And so it started to, mess up my life like even more, than I had agreed to. And so eventually, we come up with this plan to get it the F out of the barracks room. And we had to wait until we secured for the Christmas holiday. So then me and my roommate, who never agreed to any of this, even though he did have some of the stuff in the box, then the two of us are carrying this huge, heavy box like a mile, because neither one of us had a car in Japan. So we're carrying this box like a mile to the AFN office, and looking like two Lance Corporals carrying a huge box, And so then we get there and we distribute everything, which means, by the way, that my mom and my sister have orchestrated me actually playing Santa Claus, which I didn't agree to almost any of that, at least in my head. So then, we put out all the items on people's desks and everything, knowing that they're not going to see it, until they come back to work. But it would still be, the gesture, that the desired result that my mom wanted. And so when everybody did get back, my bosses were mad at me, because you're not supposed to give gifts up the chain. It is they who are supposed to gift me, and not this little Lance Corporal supposed to give, the staff sergeant, the gunny. We're not supposed to give them stuff. It's against the rules. So they were mad about that. and they angrily tried to pay me back. So they're like, here, here's a gift card for coffee, here's a binder, I mean, it was one thing after another, especially my one gunny who was a old salt. He was a hardcore guy, and really took it personally. He later appreciated it and sent me a Christmas card for years after that, again thinking like I enjoy Christmas, which so then my fellow low-ranking folks were completely indifferent, like they don't appreciate anything. If my mom had sent like whiskey and explosives, then they would have been happy. But the ones that had kids, they got toys and things, and just like stocking stuffers, a bunch of candy and all that stuff. But I had one coworker who really did appreciate it, and so she wrote me a letter years later, and she thought of this apparently, and she wanted to give me the rundown of like why this was such a big deal. So she had broken up with her boyfriend. Her roommate was staying out of the room with somebody else, and she didn't like that roommate anyway because the roommate had borrowed money that she hadn't paid back. So this contributed to the loneliness. She actually broke her finger in anger when her grandmother died, and she heard about it via email. So that's how she found out about that. She always grew up loving Christmas and was alone in Japan for Christmas this year. She could not even bear to email her family on Christmas Day or call them or anything. So she was so sad on Christmas Eve that she broke her toothbrush when she was brushing her teeth because she was sobbing so much. This is all in this letter. So she woke up despondent on Christmas morning. She was so sad that she didn't know what else to do except go to work because everything was closed. And I think some people probably have been at times in their life, and I know I have, where you just don't know what else to do but go to this other place you have a key, and go inside there. So that's what she did. And she, even in the email, I got to quote her directly. She said that this place where she was stationed should have had some physical separation from the rest of the universe, very much like one of Dante's circles of hell. Everyone else's joy stopped at the gates, and the feeling of loss was almost palpable. Never more was this statement true than at Christmas time at this place. And so anyway, she goes to work, and so to her great surprise, there is Christmas presents there waiting for her because of the wishes he wasn't Santa Claus, which was me. And there was, like I said, candy in there. There was a robe and stuff, but there was a toothbrush in the box for each person because my mom worked at a dentist office. And so she said that the mere presence of the toothbrush was what saved Christmas for her. She said, I had to go back and get the letter to quote it. It felt like the entire trauma that was the day before was entirely mended by that one gleaming toothbrush. I can't describe how happy I was to receive it. It was as if the heavens themselves had swooped down and enveloped me in warmth and a solution to my dilemma. I sat there laughing with tears in my eyes and wrapping paper all around me, so thankful for a stranger's goodwill. I was thankful for your mother's kind gesture. I couldn't have been more moved. It felt like I had been touched by an angel. So I would say that the thing that taught me is, if you hate the holiday, just turn it outward. I think focusing on others makes it feel better. And the other lesson, I think, is that if you need stocking stuffers, throw in a toothbrush. Maybe not, if that's not your thing, maybe in other personal care items. Maybe somebody needs a bunch of condoms. I don't know. But either way, happy holidays from me.